Most people would find, with the characters of any ongoing series, would find it tremendously difficult to keep track of just that. But you've got 5 going, 5 series with all their characters and the development that you invest in each one of them. Do you compartmentalize your brain for each? Is there a lobe per series?
I don't know. I mean, there may be. There's certainly.
They don't cross over?
No. Well, there does tend to be a voice for each of them, which is interesting. So it's almost as if there's a different style for each of them, and I think that's probably true, that we do have a different. I write each of the books in a slightly different register. Mara Motswe, I suppose, those books, certainly the dialogue I'm writing with some attention to African English, which has a certain nice formality about it. Isabel Dalhousie, I suppose there are certain considerations there. Scotland Street has a particular feel to it because the length of the chapters, every chapter is 1,100 words because it is published in a newspaper beforehand, so on. So there are various modes or styles that I will adopt. As far as crossing over, no, I tend not to get them mixed up. I'm constantly approached by people who say, could I introduce the characters to one another, in that Irene from Scotland Street, many people would like her to meet Isabel Dalhousie because they feel Isabel Dalhousie would deal with her. I feel that that's really taking matters a bit far, because fiction involves really quite a considerable suspension of belief anyway. And if you made it even more unrealistic by introducing 2 fictional characters to one another, I think that would be a problem. I did once forget who I was writing about. I was writing, it's some novels ago in the Mara Motswe series, and my editor in New York, Edward Kastenmeier, who's a very attentive and helpful editor, said to me, hold on, in this new manuscript, on page 85 or whatever, Mara Motswe is sounding suspiciously like Isabel Dalhousie. Could you take a look at it? And I had a look, and of course it was. I'd sort of modulated into Isabel Dalhousie mode, and so we corrected that. So occasionally that could happen, but that's rare.
So we can rule out any Isabel visits Botswana.
I'm afraid.
Isabel goes on safari.
No, she doesn't. She doesn't. No, I don't think. But thank you for that suggestion anyway.
What other routines do you have for writing? I mean, you can shut it off when you want to, but other than that, you have to write.
I feel that I do. I don't suffer from one of those rather odd conditions. There is a particular condition, sometimes referred to as the midnight disease, of people who actually really have to write. Yeah. I mean, they're compelled, and there's a neurological explanation for that. I'm not in that category, but I do feel that I need to do it in the same way, I suppose, in which somebody who writes music or makes music or does anything that the heart is really in, really feels that they have to do it.
Yeah.
My other aspects of it, I suppose, is that I do actually have a bit of a regime. So I often write very early in the morning, and I'll get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, or sometimes 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'll write until about 6:30.
Yeah.
And then I go back to bed, and I find I have a second hour or hour and a half of sleep, which is very restorative. But I get a lot done then, and I wake up.
Is it something about the time of the day that the words come flooding? That kind of half dreamlike state that some writers like writing in?
It could be, yes. I think that's right, because dreams, I often will have a dream. I dream dramatic sequences and narratives. I have stories in my dreams. They aren't lucid dreams, namely dreams in which you can control. That's a rather odd category of dreams. They aren't lucid dreams, but I nonetheless do dreams, stories, and I have dreamt a number of stories which I've subsequently published. I had a wonderful dream just over a year ago in which I was going to Italy, and I was flying to Pisa, and I'd arranged to hire a car, but when I went to get the hired car, I was told they were all out, but I could have a bulldozer.
It's like,
And I drove off in...
you're 7 or something. It sounds like a young boy's dream, you know? And then I got the
well, that's
bulldozer.
it. Actually, I hadn't thought of that. That's the wish fulfillment. I mean, we all want bulldozers when we're 6 or 7.
That's true.
And some of us, that remains in the... and it comes out. No, that's very perceptive, Seamus. That's very, very, very good. But I then woke up. But I did write a story in which I used that. I woke up with that wonderful sense of I suppose, surprise at finding that one was driving a bulldozer away from Pisa Airport. And so I immediately wrote a story about a man who goes to Pisa Airport, finds himself in that position, drives off in the bulldozer to Montalcino, which is a wonderful town which produces a very fine Italian wine, Brunello di Montalcino. And he's renting a house there. And he goes in his bulldozer, and he has a wonderful time. And he meets the locals who actually really rather like him. And he starts having drinks in a cafe with one of the locals who says that he has a vineyard, but it's just outside the zone of production of Brunello di Montalcino, which would make his wine quite valuable. And he's in the Rosso di Montalcino area, which is much cheaper. Rosso di Montalcino can be very nice, almost as good as Brunello, but Brunello is much. So, but the division of the zone of production is a sort of dike, a wall. And he says, could he possibly shift this a bit? So he shifts it, and he gets this chap into the zone of production for Brunello, and they're delighted, and they invite him for dinner. And then, the story isn't going to go on too long, don't worry, but what actually happens, he's then approached by the local priest, who says there's a very unpleasant man from Rome who's recently built a holiday house in the village, and they don't like it. And they wonder whether he could possibly bulldoze it. And so he bulldozes it, and he gets rid of this holiday house, and then he goes off in his bulldozer to Pisa, and they give him a great send-off. And he gets back to Pisa Airport, and he hands over the bulldozer, and he said, I'd love to come again. And the vehicle rental people say, well, we can do a combine harvester next time. And that was it.
Before we take questions from the audience, I met your friend Ian earlier, and he asked me to ask you, for the benefit of our audience, about your musical adventures and the elusive C sharp.
Yes, yes, I do. I'm very interested in music, as are we all. We formed an orchestra. My wife and I formed an orchestra about 13, 14 years ago for musically challenged people, which includes us. Are you musical? Can you play anything? No, right. Well, you'd be in. We'd put you in the percussion section. You just.
I actually played percussion.
Oh, do you?
I did, and I was lousy.
Oh, well, then
Yeah.
you're definitely in.
Yeah.
You're definitely in. And so we set up this orchestra, and it's been a great success. We called it the Really Terrible Orchestra, so that people knew exactly where they stood.
The expectation.
There's no audition to get in, and people join. Although we're now so popular, we do have a waiting list. And we play really, really badly. And I play the...
You've played. Now tell me about some of the venues that you've played.
The most prestigious venues you would care to mention. We could command the Carnegie Hall if they invited us. And we could... we went to New York 2 years ago. We went and played...
toured?
We toured. We've done 3 tours now. I didn't go on the third one, which was to Utrecht. The government of the Netherlands, I think as a sort of political diversion, invited the Really Terrible Orchestra in that I think they wanted people's attention diverted from the current crisis. And also they wanted to show people that things could get worse. So they invited us, and the orchestra just been, while I was on tour, they went off to Utrecht, and I'm sure it was very, very successful. Our first tour was to a little fishing village in Fife, north of Edinburgh, where we live, called Pittenweem. And we went and played in Pittenweem, and Pittenweem had never had an orchestra. go to play to it before, and we put up notices saying free wine. And then we put in smaller print, the Raleigh Chamber Orchestra will play. And we had the entire community. And they loved it. And we had a T-shirt for the tour. And then we, emboldened by this, we thought we'd go to New York. And we went to New York 2 years ago, and we played on April the 1st in the New York Town Hall. And it was a tremendous success. 1,400 seats, 1,300 filled. Some
Fantastic.
Exactly, some not by people we were related to or friends. All actual genuine members of the public came. And we played abysmally, absolutely dreadful cacophony, and at the end we got a standing ovation in New York.
In New York.
In New York, where they barely clap. In fact, they don't clap in New York. They're so cool. It's very, very uncool to clap. They'd say the clapping occurs in New Jersey and places like that, but not in New York. They clapped, and they got the joke. They really got the joke. And we've now got 5 offshoot orchestras in the United States. And indeed, I think, we've got one in Ontario, and they may be here. So we have, we're catching on as a movement. And it's very therapeutic. For the players.
What do you play?
I play the bassoon, but I don't play the whole bassoon. I go up to the high E, and thereafter there's a design flaw in the bassoon. Above that, the fingering is really very difficult, and so I stop at that point, and I wait for the music to become more accessible. I believe in accessible music.
It's selective notes.
Selective notes. Oh yes. We all play selective notes. In fact, we do very, very good elimination waltzes. So it's tremendous, tremendous fun. It really is terrific, terrific fun, and we all feel a whole lot better afterwards. Most people could join. Most people, I suspect, in the audience today play the clarinet, because everybody learns clarinet at school, and then they forget about it, and it's only much later on, when they're having psychotherapy, that these repressed clarinet memories come out. And the therapist says clarinet, and this tremendous moment, and the patient says, I played it. And then, shall we move on?
We shall, yeah. Any chance of you touring Canada?
We would love to come to Toronto. We would like to come here, and I think we will come here at some point. But we'll give you adequate warning.
So we'll take questions from the floor. His time is pressing, I know, and we've got about 15 minutes. So all I'd ask is the courtesy of just keeping your questions as brief as possible, so that as many people can ask questions to the man himself here. If you could line up at the mic and make things so much easier. Sorry, just right there, yeah.
I have a reason why I'm asking this question, so I kind of want to include my reason. I want to know how old Isabel Dalhousie is, because I'm 56, and I've always read Isabel as being older than I am. And when Charlie was born, I was absolutely floored. It was like, where did he come from?
Well, thank you very much for that question. Isabel is in her early 40s. Now, I know that may come as a surprise, because a number of people shared your view, and after the first book in the series, The Sunday Philosophy Club, a number of people said that they had seen her as older than that. But she is actually, she's been 42 for a few years, but that's roughly where she is. And I think that the people thought of her as being older because she represents a particular sort of intellectual Edinburgh lady who might give that impression. It's the type. She's fairly conventional in some respects.
So
but
I'm not intellectual then, because she seems so much older than I am.
I'd have to look at your question before I answer that. But I must say, the big issue, of course, is the fact that she's got this much younger fiance, Jamie. And I originally was going to make that relationship platonic, but I came under this great pressure to allow it to develop in a different direction, on the grounds that it would be empowering for my readers, lady readers over 40. And many of them have written to me and said that they feel considerably empowered by the fact that Isabel has.
Thank you for the question.